Did you know there is a hostel in New York City that no longer appears on any map? Because every guest who ever stayed there was erased from the system one by one? That's not an urban legend. It's my story. I was 23 when I checked into the Holloway Hostel, a cheap old brownstone near the Lower East Side. The place had been around since the 1950s, but no one online seemed to remember it existed. No Google reviews, no Yelp page, just a blurry photo and an address that sometimes vanished from GPS. I was new to the city, broke, chasing a photography internship, and desperate for a bed that didn't cost half my paycheck. The Holloway looked fine. Slightly cracked walls, old iron elevator, yellow light bulbs that buzzed like tired bees. The woman at the front desk didn't speak much. She just slid a metal key toward me, actual metal, not a card, and said, "Third floor. Don't use the mirror at night." I laughed, thinking she was joking. That was the first time I heard the clicking, a faint, uneven sound, like fingernails tapping inside the walls. I brushed it off. New York was full of rats and broken pipes, nothing to worry about. My room was small, one window facing an alley, a single bed, a dresser, and yes, a huge mirror nailed to the wall beside the door. It looked ancient, framed in black wood. The glass had tiny bubbles under the surface, the kind that distort reflections. That first night I heard someone crying. Not next door, inside my room. The sound came from the mirror. A soft, stifled sob, like someone pressing their face against glass from the other side. When I turned on the lamp, it stopped. I tried to sleep, but every time my eyes closed, I saw faces in the reflection. Not clear, just shapes. Pale, watching. By morning, the hallway smelled like wet iron. One of the doors on the floor was open. Inside, the bed was stripped, the window cracked open. No luggage, no person. When I asked the front desk lady about the other guest, she said without looking up, there was no one in that room. I thought maybe the hostel had squatters or transient tenants. I even went outside and checked the building S directory, but only 4 rooms were listed for rent. The rest were under renovation. That night I recorded audio on my phone before sleeping. When I played it back in the morning, there was whispering, hundreds of overlapping voices, and one clear phrase among them. "She's watching you now." The third night I met someone else, a man, maybe in his 40s, sitting alone in the lobby. He looked pale, like he hadn't slept in days. He said, "You're new here. You should leave before she moves your key." When I asked who she was, he only stared at the mirror behind the reception desk and said, "The owner never left." He vanished the next morning. His bed was cold, sheets untouched. By the 5th night, the mirror in my room began to breathe. Not literally, but the surface pulsed in and out, as if something behind it was pressing, testing it. I tried to cover it with a blanket, but every time I turned away, the blanket would fall to the floor, folded neatly. That was when I noticed something on the back of the mirror frame. Carved initials, HH. The same initials as the hostel itself. The front desk woman refused to talk. She just said, "Don't look at her reflection when the lights go out." On the 6th night, the lights did go out. The entire floor went black around 2:13 a.m. Through the dark, I could hear doors opening, one after another, followed by slow, dragging footsteps in the hallway. And from my mirror, a hand pressed through the glass, pale, thin, fingernails blackened like old wood. It touched the wall, leaving a smear that looked like ash. Then it slowly pulled back inside, as if retreating into a dark, endless corridor that existed within the reflection. I froze, couldn't scream, couldn't move. Then a voice, my own voice, whispered from the mirror, "You shouldn't have listened to her." The next morning, my reflection didn't match me. When I raised my hand, it lagged. When I smiled, it didn't. And in its eyes was the pale woman I'd seen the night before, standing behind me. The morning after the mirror mimicked me, I packed my bag. I wanted out, but the elevator wasn't working and the stairwell door was chained shut. When I asked the front desk woman for help, she simply said, "Once you've seen her, the city forgets you." Her voice cracked, as though she was saying something she wasn't supposed to. Then she slid a small brass key across the counter. The tag read, "Basement at staff only." I didn't want to go down there, but the chain on the stairwell padlock had the same emblem engraved into it. HH. That was the only way out. The basement was colder than it should have been. Too cold for summer in Manhattan. The air smelled like damp wallpaper and rust. As I descended, the sound of dripping water turned into faint humming. A woman's lullaby, off-key, echoing in circles. When my flashlight hit the far wall, I froze. There were mirrors everywhere, tall, cracked, warped, lined along the basement like a gallery of forgotten reflections. Some were covered with sheets, others still wet with condensation, as though someone had been breathing on them from the inside. In the center of the room stood a chair. On it, a guest ledger, old, bound in red leather. When I opened it, the pages weren't written in ink, but scratched, clawed into the paper. Each name ended the same way. Checked in, never checked out. My flashlight flickered. Behind me, one of the mirrors rippled, and then I saw myself. But the reflection was different. Older, gaunter, eyes blackened. My reflection smiled and said in my voice, "You came back." The glass cracked. Hands, dozens of them, pressed from behind the surface. Men, women, even children. Their mouths moved in silence, mouthing the same word over and over again. "Stay." I bolted for the stairs, but the basement door wasn't there anymore. Instead, the corridor had changed. The concrete walls stretched and curved like a tunnel, deeper, darker, leading into something that couldn't exist below a New York hostel. My phone's compass spun wildly. My GPS read, "Location unavailable." The further I walked, the more mirrors I saw, but they weren't reflecting me anymore. They showed rooms from above, guests sleeping, eating, arguing, rooms that shouldn't exist. And in every mirror stood her, a tall woman in a black 1940s housekeeper's dress, hair pinned, face pale as marble. Her eyes were two hollow sockets, and yet they followed me with perfect precision. When I finally reached the end of the tunnel, I found a door. The brass plate read, "H. Holloway, proprietor." Inside, the air was different. Warm, perfumed with old lavender and dust. A room preserved in time. Photographs lined the walls, smiling guests from decades past. But every photograph had one thing in common: the same woman standing in the background. The housekeeper. I turned over one photograph. On the back, written in faded pencil, "She keeps them here, where the city can't remember." And that's when I heard her voice, clear and close, whispering right next to my ear, "We only take what the world forgets." The lights went out. Every mirror in the room shattered at once, but instead of glass, black water poured out, thick and cold. It rose to my knees, then my chest, then my neck. I screamed, clawing for the door, but it was gone. And through that dark water, I saw faces. All the lost guests, their mouths open in silent pleas, their hands reaching for me. One face I recognized, the man from the lobby. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, but I read his lips. "You have to give her someone else." Then everything went dark. I woke up in my bed. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds. My bag was still packed. My phone was on the nightstand, battery dead. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamt it all. But when I looked at the floor, my shoes were soaked in black water. The mirror was gone. Only a clean white outline remained on the wall, shaped like a rectangle, as though it had been absorbed. Downstairs, the lobby was empty, the desk unattended. No guests, no noise, no woman. The front door was wide open. Outside, New York was alive again. Cars honking, sunlight bouncing off windows, people shouting at taxis. But no one looked at me, not a single person. When I waved, they walked past, their eyes sliding right through me as though I wasn't there. I went to the nearest deli to ask for directions. The man behind the counter didn't respond. I yelled, I begged, nothing. Then I looked at the refrigerator S-glass door beside me and saw something that made my blood freeze. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. Standing behind me was the pale woman from the mirror, her hand resting on my shoulder. Her eyes were no longer hollow. They were mine. I ran back to the hostel, but the building wasn't there. Between the two brownstones on that street, There was only a narrow bricked wall, no sign of the Holloway hostel ever existing. Police told me later that no hostel by that name had ever been licensed in Manhattan. The address I gave them belonged to an abandoned lot demolished in the 1980s after a fire accident. The property records listed the owner as Helena Holloway, who went missing in 1954. When I asked for her photograph, it was the same woman from the mirrors. The file said she ran a small boarding house for immigrants and artists, until several guests disappeared one after another. She was questioned but never charged. The night before her arrest, she locked herself in the basement and was never found again. The police sealed the building. A year later, tenants reported hearing crying from beneath the floorboards. Eventually, the building was condemned, until somehow it reopened as Holloway Hostel. The officer who told me this said he'd seen something strange too. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I used to pass that address every day, but one morning it just wasn't there anymore." That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've moved twice, changed jobs, deleted every photo from that week. But sometimes, when I walk past glass storefronts or subway windows, I catch her reflection instead of mine. And every time I blink, she's closer, her lips forming one question, the same one that haunts me when I try to sleep. Who will take your place?